A lot of the beginning content of the presentation has already been delivered, so I'm just going to go through them very quickly. Again, this is just an introduction of what is CMT. CMT is the most common form of hereditary neuropathies that affects 1 in 2,500 people in the US. We heard this earlier today during the genetic panel. It is a genetic condition that affects the peripheral nerves. And these are nerves that connect your brain and spinal cord all the way down to your feet, your legs, and your arms. In CMT, you see the nerves become progressively more damaged over time, leading to a range of symptoms, including muscle weakness, atrophy, nerve pain, and difficulty in walking. So if you were in the 1A breakout session, Bruce, kind of walk through what are the components of your nerves. So I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Again, you have your axon and your myelin sheet. Your axon here is the green. The myelin sheet is the one that's wrapping around the axon, which really helps in delivering the electrical signals along the axon. And depending on, we know that CMT has over 100 different genes. These genes are generally involved in making proteins that support the structure or function of your nerves. And so when there are specific genes that are being implicated, this also shows and determines the subtypes of CMT, and symptoms can vary. And so here is just an example of a demyelinating subtype of CMT. So you have your DNA where it's almost like the cookbook where it has everything, the recipe that your body needs to make. And so in your healthy participant here has no CMT, you have the gene highlighted in green. Those are healthy, makes normal and healthy myelin sheath that wraps around the axons. Then when you have CMT and you have a demyelinating type of mutation, one of these genes is implicated. And so when it wants to make a normal myelin sheet, it can't do that. And so the wrapping over time is degraded, and this ultimately leads to nerve damage. So for this presentation, it's really more focused on in terms of what has the CMT Research Foundation have done in the last 5 years. And it's really to talk about, how the co-founders, what the outlook was for this foundation. And the mission is to really look at different cures and development of therapies for all CMT types. And so what we have done is that we really focused on translational research. Looked at the gaps. What were the challenges? How can we accelerate the drug development therapy? And then we focused on who can we bring in that can help in terms of accelerating these different drugs and therapies that are being developed right now. So the CMT Research Foundation, as you heard from Brett and Bipasha earlier this morning, who are, and multiple people actually that are here, are part of our scientific advisory board. And so what they do is when we have a project that comes into our pipeline, and when professors or researchers apply, the scientific advisory board are the ones who really look at the projects and say that there is scientific merit in the proposal. And then within that scientific merit, they also look at the projects in terms of measuring 5 different categories. Is there an impact to the field, to the drug development? Is this going to be impactful for the CMT community? And another measure is the scientific and technological merit. Does this actually make sense? Their work plan in terms of how long does it take? Have they really thought about, that this type of experiment can be done in this timely manner? And then also the investigators and the environment that the investigators are in. Are they the experts? Do they have the collaborations and the right people that they need in order to succeed in their project? And then finally, we also consider, especially for our industry applicants or for biotech companies, is that what is the competitive landscape and commercialization opportunities there. So part of our project is that we want to ensure that they are successful, and once they are successful, we also have some return of investment, so then we can have that pool of budget to fund more projects in the future. And then the third part of this is that we really can't do any of this without the generous supporters. And when both Pat and Susan alluded to earlier, really the community is what helps us drive our successes. And so whether the support is through monetary support or for awareness, those are really important components to understand what the challenges and needs are. And then here I'm just going to highlight really quickly the 4 research priorities that we really use in terms of the types of projects that we're looking for and that could help overcome the barriers and the challenges that we see in the CMT space. And so you heard yesterday from Dr. Afrouz Rashnanajad, who talked about gene therapy. So there are a lot of momentum in terms of the different types of therapies that are being developed. And so with gene therapies, they're trying to target the main genetic cause of a particular subtype of CMT. And so if you can narrow that down and do some replace or blocking what, for example, for PMP22, where in CMT1A, where there's too much of the protein actually, causes demyelination. And so there are different techniques in gene therapy that can be developed to target the main cause of the disease. And then you also have here promoting nerve health. And so when you have insults to the myelin or the axons, we saw that ultimately there will be nerve damage. So if we promote and develop therapies and drugs that actually help in sustaining and promoting nerve health, that would also be very helpful for the CMT patients. And again, with the development and of these drugs and therapies, there's still that challenge of how can we deliver the drug to the right tissues. And the blood-nerve barrier remains a big question in terms of delivery. And so any of our projects that are working on different types of delivery vehicles is another focus of ours. And then de-risking clinical trials is a secondary research priority. And this is really looking at, some of the biomarkers that we heard that are needed still for clinical trials. How can we really improve, clinical trials in a very efficient way? So so here is just a schematic of, it's really, a narrowed down sheet of like all of our 20 projects. So in 5 years, I feel like I keep going up, so maybe I should just put this down. That'll be easier. Okay, so in the last 5 years, the funding breakdown for our projects, where 50% of the research dollars really spent on CMT1A, the most prevalent form, then 20% has gone to CMT1B, 12% to CMT2A, 6% to CMT1X, 6% to CMT4B1, and 3% to CMT2E. And then next to each of the projects, you have the CMT type and also the research priorities, the 4 research priorities that I just talked about previously to this slide. And out of this, 20 projects that we've funded so far, 6 of these projects have been completed. They're highlighted in a, I don't know what color that is, maybe like seafoam green color. So you have the Cleopas and Scott Harper project, where they're looking at gene therapy to target PMP22 and 1A. And then you have Maurizio D'Antonio, and actually Bruce talked about this earlier, where Inflectus is looking at the stress response system and how that could be modulated. And so he's testing that compound in 1B mouse model. And then DTX Novartis, which you all heard about, is targeting PMP22 and 1A. And then Shift is also using a different technology for gene therapy to target 1A and PMP22 specifically. And then Horizon, who is looking at HDAC6 inhibitors and application to that in CMT1A, and then AcuraStem looking at different compounds and screening for these compounds that could be applicable for 2A. And so, out of these projects, 5 of them actually have preclinical candidates. And so one, DTX Novartis, again, you've heard so much about them in the last 2 days. Recently they were acquired by Novartis in July of this year for $1 billion. And then you have Armadas Bio, which is a new funded company, and what they're actually doing is they license the project from Cleopa and Scott Harper. And then now they are using this gene therapy to test whether it gets delivered to Schwann cells in the peripheral nerves. And then we have Augustine Therapeutics, also another biotech company developing HDAC6 inhibitors in the application of CMT1A. And along with Horizon, both have different formulations. These drugs have shown positive results in the physiological and electrophysiological testing in CMT1A mouse models. Both are preparing for investigational new drug application. And what this means is that they are performing all the different experiments to test that their compound is safe and effective before they can even apply that into clinical trials. So they send this application to their regulatory agency. So for the US, it would be the FDA, and then the FDA would look at their results, and then we'll give them the okay to proceed to a clinical trial. Then we have Shift, who again is developing a new technology to decrease the levels of PMP22. The early data showed that there's efficacy in CMT1A mice. They're working on a series of experiments designed to demonstrate, again, safety, distribution, which are all important elements for an IND application. And then, so far, all of our projects have advanced or have gone to the next steps of the process. And we're lucky that I think none of them have failed. And in research, failure is so common. And so I think this is partly because of the way we approach our projects. And you heard this from Pat earlier as well. And so, we can take DTX, for example, where they met, I think, Susan and Paul attended this bio convention, and that's where they met Artie, and Artie at that time wasn't even looking into CMT. And so during that conversation, they were saying, hey, your technology might actually be applicable to CMT, so why don't we work together? And so in 2019, CMTRF grants DTX $125,000 just to do a proof of concept, whether their technology can be applicable to CMT. And then in 2020, they applied for another grant and then received $350,000. And then in 2021, they did their Series A and received $100 million. And then fast forward to 2023, they were designated orphan drug status. And what this really means is that, this drug is an indication that's for rare diseases. And this has been, this usually is given by the FDA. And so that's always a benefit for companies who are developing drugs and get these type of status. And then in July 2023, DTX is acquired by Novartis for $1 billion. And so I think this concept, of being proactive, being a partner throughout the relationship of our funded partners, and having a scientific advisory board who have all the different expertise, I think is the formula that have worked for us. And so this is really to just show, the impact that we've done. Again, we scout new technology. We have our SAB for the scientific expertise. CMTRF funds novel ideas. We also connect with different opinion leaders in the field, and then convention like this to engage patients and the different stakeholders in the field, and then remaining a critical partner with the different stakeholders. And this is just to show a comparison in 2019, what the pipeline looked like. Now in 2023, CMT RF, kind of grew that pipeline. I think, let me see here, my notes. So in 2019, we had one CMTRF funded project, and then in total in the pipeline, there were 16. And in this year, there are 28 total projects in the pipeline, and we funded 9 CMT Research Foundation funded projects. So I think we're just going to keep growing. We want to keep accelerating, and we want to get there faster, and we want to be able to, interact with everyone in the ecosystem.